Control the people's minds and you can keep the Ukraine war going. That has been Putin's propaganda ploy ever since he launched the Ukraine invasion, and it has worked out well for him so far. But propaganda only works when your allies all stick to the story, and that isn't the case for Putin anymore. Kremlin propaganda has backstabbed Russia's leader by admitting that the Ukraine war has already been lost. The unthinkable has happened, and it's all over for Putin's deceptive game. And there is one man who is at the center of it all: Vladimir Solovyov. Long one of the Kremlin's most reliable and virulent propagandists, Solovyov has conducted a massive turnaround on state TV that has exposed everything that the Kremlin is doing to wreck the Russian economy. The man who only a few days ago was telling Putin and his cronies that they should be bombing London has started sharing the numbers, facts and opinions of everyday Russians as they struggle to come to grips with the impact that Putin's Ukraine invasion has had on them. For Putin and the entire Kremlin, this is like a shot of poison to their collective veins. The man who is being paid handsomely to spew the mindless narrative that Putin wants his people to believe has come right out and said that it is all nonsense. Russia is struggling. It's on the verge of economic collapse. And as you'll find out if you keep on watching, Putin's desperate attempt to control the spiraling state of his narrative is utterly failing. So, what did Solovyov actually say? Anna from Ukraine, who is a YouTuber who commentates on developments in Russia that are often missed by the mainstream media, explains the basics. She points out that Solovyov is one of the most dangerous men in Russia, specifically because his position on state TV means that he is able to influence the opinions of millions of people who simply don't have access to independent news sources that enable them to get a clearer picture of what is happening, not just in the world, but even in their own country. Solovyov is an extremely dangerous person that created a lot of crimes with his talent of communicating, of spreading Russian BS and so on, Anna says. This talent has perhaps allowed him to earn billions of rubles from the Kremlin, she adds, which makes it very clear that this is a propagandist who has happily suckled on Putin's teat for as long as he could extract money out of the Russian president. Solovyov's reputation is such that even the US Department of State has labeled him a face of Kremlin propaganda, and noted that he has been spreading what it claims to be Guinness World Record-breaking diatribes against the West and Ukraine since 2010. This is a man who has, or had, a network of 17 Telegram channels along with his own state-sponsored TV show, and it's fair to say that he is a main source of news for many people in Russia. We tell you all of this so that you understand the caliber of this propagandist in terms of his pro-Kremlin opinions. And now he's turned on the Kremlin. Solovyov has plunged a knife right into Putin's back, as Anna from Ukraine explains. So this very person decided to enumerate a number of problems that right now destroy the Russian Federation from the inside, she says. Among those problems, Anna adds, are the sky-high interest rates that the average Russian has to deal with, even after Russia's central bank has spent the last few months chopping away at those rates. Solovyov also exposed how Russia's crippled economy is leading to businesses being destroyed, and how many people who are reportedly experts on Russia's economy are predicting a complete collapse, all due to Putin's refusal to end his war in Ukraine. Of course, those outside of Russia have known about these problems for a long time. Right now, Russia's key rate is 15.5%, following another Bank of Russia cut of 0.5%. Whatever minor hope can be derived from a cut evaporates completely when that cut still means that Russia is dealing with interest rates that are triple or even quadruple those seen in places like the US, Australia, Saudi Arabia, China, the UK, Canada, and practically all developed Western nations, per trading economics. Even in Rwanda, the key policy rate is 7.25%, less than half the rate seen in Russia right now. And on the business front, Russia's small oil producers are floundering as Western sanctions prompted by Putin's invasion are destroying them. Russian oil prices have been pushed down to $40 per barrel, Yahoo Finance said on February 18th, and that simply isn't high enough to stop many of Russia's smaller suppliers from becoming insolvent. Anna from Ukraine adds to all of this, noting that one of Russia's most important propagandists has exposed so much more. So interest rates are high, businesses are closing, restaurants and shops closing, apartment blocks remain unsold. That is what he kept repeating, she said to Solovyov's outburst. And there was more. Russia's struggling construction, metallurgy, oil and gas industries all came under the propagandist's microscope in a rant that, for once, wasn't aimed at Russia's enemies. It was a direct message to the Kremlin. A message that tells Putin that the Russian people know that the war that their president started is crippling them economically. Russia's economy is in the death zone, The Economist said in a February 16th article. Though Russia's economy may not collapse outright, the outlet says, it will also not recover to any decent level until long after the Ukraine war is over. Russia's economy is stuck, lost in a sort of negative equilibrium, where all it can do is barely hold itself together as Putin's relentless appetite for war consumes every type of industry that Russia has that isn't directly associated with the war that he is waging. It's this horrific state of affairs for the everyday Russian that Solovyov has called out, and it seems that he may have taken such a bold step because he is slowly recognizing that a major power shift is going on in Russia. Putin's grip is slipping. The authoritarian who is so desperate to keep hold of his country can no longer hide the realities that his decisions have brought down upon his own people. Also speaking to the ordinary people, Anna says of Solovyov's exposé, he focuses on these very obvious signals of the dying economy. So perhaps the very fact that he started talking about such things is influenced by the size of the problem that people are talking about on the streets, at work, in their kitchens, and to pretend that nothing is happening is very wrong. In other words, Russia's economic problems have grown too big to ignore. And for a man like Solovyov, that fact creates a dilemma. Does he continue to toe the Kremlin line that everything is fine and that Russia is powerful? Well, if he does, he ruins his own credibility, and his career as a pseudo-journalist is all but over. Or does the Kremlin propagandist turn on his paymasters to deliver a dose of the reality that is affecting the Russian people, thus risking the wrath of Putin himself? Well, Solovyov has spoken out against Russia's power base before. In the wake of the Kremlin's August 2024 humiliation in Kursk, when Ukraine counter-invaded and snatched up Russian territory, the propagandist said that a resignation is necessary. But even these seeming acts of rebellion have always been tinged with caution. A resignation doesn't translate to Putin's resignation, and that's the point. Solovyov has always tinged whatever scant criticism that he delivers with the undertone of suggesting that Putin is still great, and that all he has to do is surround himself with better people. Well, not this time. By calling out the state of Russia's economy, the Kremlin's favourite propagandist has unavoidably showcased how it's Putin's ineptitude that has led the Russian people to the fate that they now face. And in a few minutes, we're going to explain how it's not just Solovyov over whom Putin is losing his control. An entire network of military bloggers is also turning against the Kremlin and reversing the tide of Putin's propaganda tidal wave. That development twists the knife that Solovyov has plunged between Putin's shoulder blades. And by the way, if this is the kind of insight that you want more of, make sure you're subscribed to The Military Show. We break it down like this every single day. Now, what we're seeing here is the breakdown of the most important weapon that Putin has in his arsenal when it comes to his own people. Narrative dominance has always been the bedrock of Putin's leadership style, as Russia knows that controlling the conversation is what prevents Russia's people from turning against him when times get tough. People like Solovyov are supposed to help Putin with that task. He should be beating the Kremlin drum at all times, not going on state television to expose the shambles of the Russian economy to the entire world. Putin is such a great believer in the concept of narrative dominance that he also tries to exert it on the global stage. The ongoing peace negotiations with Ukraine offer the perfect example, as David A. Depchler writes for Forbes. His strategy now depends less on decisive battlefield success and more on convincing the world, particularly the United States, that Russian victory is inevitable, that continued support for Ukraine is futile, and that pragmatic Americans would be wiser to prepare for profitable normalization than prolonged confrontation. Depchler says, "It's lies upon lies, and every single tall tale that comes out of Putin's mouth gets added to an entire tapestry of whoppers that the Russian propaganda machine is supposed to keep clean. Even one thread out of place could lead to that entire tapestry crumbling, and that, more than anything else, is why a major propagandist exposing the Kremlin's inadequacies is so damaging to Putin. A thread has been pulled. The tapestry begins to unweave." Now, the damage is being done to Putin, and it has led him down some desperate roads in recent days. We'll dig into that soon. But before we do, Solovyov turning his back on the Kremlin is clearly a watershed moment. Definitely for the first time during Putin's regime, Anna from Ukraine says of Solovyov's betrayal, adding, "And it symbolizes the loss of Putin's control, because in Russia, people rarely express their opinions openly, and usually they receive their opinions from the state TV, from the popular vloggers that were allowed by the Kremlin regime. What does it mean when the opinion former is feeding information to the people that makes them wake up to the fact that it's the Kremlin's fault that they're struggling in the first place? Well, certainly not anything that the Kremlin is going to want to see. And if Solovyov keeps on doing what he has started to do, more Russians are going to see that it is their own government that is hurting them due to Putin's insatiable lust for war with Ukraine. Maybe the turncoat propagandist will focus on how Putin is stealing more money from the average person's pocket by way of taxation, all to keep on funding his ridiculous war. Asia News has exposed all of this, as it points out in a February 18th piece that municipal service rates across Russia rose by between 8 and 12% on average in 2025. And that's on top of VAT being increased by 1.7% on all products on January the 1st, all of which has led to sharp increases in consumer goods that Russia's people could barely afford in the first place. Even good propaganda can only hide what's happening in Russia for so long. A propagandist actually delivering the reality to the people who form their entire opinions based on what he says is a death sentence for the Kremlin. So where does all of this leave Putin? Well, we told you earlier that his control is slipping, that he's going to do anything that he can to maintain it. Russia's leader is getting desperate to keep his narrative in play, and that has led to him making what may be the dumbest move that he's ever made since he launched his Ukraine invasion. Putin has banned Telegram. Yep, and that means that many of the voices that constantly spoke out in support of the Kremlin's policies, making money from doing so in the process, have been silenced. And make no mistake about it, that amounts to a legion of propagandists who are now furious at the Kremlin for taking away their source of income. And to add a little context to why the Telegram ban is so desperate, you need to know a little bit more about just how ubiquitous this social media platform is in Russia. Over 100 million Russians use the app, the New York Times reports, and around 60 million of those users check Telegram every day. Beyond state TV and newspapers, Telegram is one of the main sources of news for the Russian people. And remember, Solovyov himself has 17 Telegram channels, so he and the Kremlin clearly saw how valuable the platform could be from a propaganda perspective. However, that value is only there for the Kremlin as long as it can control the narrative being spun on Telegram, and that's where things have fallen apart for Putin. As military bloggers report more information that the Kremlin wants to give away, and Telegram opens up opportunities for Russians to find opinions other than the Kremlin party line, it was almost inevitable that a crackdown would come. And it has. And plenty of Russian propagandists are furious about it. The fury from Russia's military bloggers in particular has been immediate. The Kyiv Independent reported on the anger that is spreading among Russia's less traditional propagandists, noting that many are calling on the Kremlin to stop depriving them of their platform in the wake of the Telegram ban and a similar ban on the use of WhatsApp in Russia. Fighter Bomber, who was one of the more notable Russian military bloggers on Telegram, sums up the general mood with a sarcastic statement. "Unfortunately, we can't cut off Starlink for the Hochli," he said, using a slur that Russia's bloggers like to use against Ukraine soldiers. "But we can cut off Telegram for Russians. And if we can, well, why not? Why not indeed, from Putin's perspective? With Telegram gone, the Kremlin can push Russians toward the state-controlled Max app, and perhaps more importantly, it can try to stop Russian people from getting news from sources that aren't necessarily Kremlin-approved. Even some of Putin's most vocal fans are up in arms about the Telegram ban, Bloomberg reported on February the 17th. The outlet says that cutting off access to this particular app may be a bridge too far for many Russians. And interestingly, some major hitters have even come out against the move. Putin's favorite mouthpiece, Dmitry Peskov, has called the loss of Telegram a shame. And wouldn't you just know it, Solovyov has also complained during a live stream that his numbers have taken a steep decline in the wake of Putin's Telegram ban. Military bloggers matter to the Kremlin. And when they're doing their jobs the way that the Kremlin wants them to, those bloggers serve as important cogs in the Russian propaganda machine. They are Putin's digital foot soldiers, CNN said back in 2023, and many have sources deep within the Russian armed forces and associated paramilitary groups, such as Wagner. The BBC adds that these bloggers are popular with Russia's readers because they often provide more information about what's happening in Ukraine than Russia's state media. Of course, they also make plenty of money while doing it, so we can't ignore that so many are angry at the Kremlin for the Telegram cutoff because they're losing their sources of income. And perhaps that's why Putin wants to shut the military bloggers down. They know too much, they say too much, and with many having audiences in the hundreds of thousands or even the millions, they're influencing the Russian people too much. Remember, Putin's entire reign is predicated on his ability to always control the narrative. When Russia has what the Kremlin might look upon as loose cannons operating on social media, more of the threads on that tapestry of lies we talked about earlier start to come loose. Russia has already started turning against these blogging propagandists toward the end of 2025. And as the Carnegie Endowment noted in December, Several had found themselves classed as foreign agents or charged with crimes under Russia's repressive extremism laws. The endowment even says that this fight against its former propaganda machine is calculated, noting that it gives the Kremlin the chance to create an impression that it is trying to silence the voices of pro-war radicals after 4 years of fighting that have left everyday Russians tired of Putin's invasion. However, the state steamroller wasn't fast enough to crush Solovyov. And now that he has turned against the Kremlin, Putin's desperation is on the verge of turning into outright despair. Who can he trust, if not the man that the Kremlin put on state TV to deliver the messages that the Kremlin wants the Russian people to hear? How is Putin supposed to control the narrative when the very peddlers of that narrative aren't towing the line? These are questions that Putin never wanted to answer, and everything that we're seeing now in terms of his attempts to repress the flow of information in Russia amounts to the actions of a leader who knows that his days are numbered. Russia is the country that suffers from the madness of its leader, to whom all of its population delegated their rights and freedoms, Anna from Ukraine says, when wrapping up her video about Solovyov's actions. Maybe the once Kremlin-favouring propagandist has realised that fact, and he's decided that using his platform to bring power to the people, or at least expose what they're going through, is more important than saying what Putin wants him to say. The Ukraine war is already lost, and every Russian is feeling the impact worse and worse with each passing day. With the knife now stuck in his back, Putin will push on, of course. But he'll do it knowing that one of Russia's most influential voices is delivering the very last kinds of messages that the Kremlin wants its people to hear. Putin has crippled his country, and Solovyov knows it. Not even the turncoat talking head has revealed just how bad things are getting for Russia. The Russian economy is in the toilet, but the country has already been flushed, and there may be no finding it in the sewage for a century. Find out why that is in our video, and if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more revelations from inside of Russia that cover what Putin's people really think about this war.